Rappin with ReefBum is sponsored by Bulk Reef Supply and Ecotech Marine.
Hey, what's happening, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Rappin with ReefBum. I'm your host, Keith Berkelhamer. So, today on the live stream, I have the pleasure of welcoming Hunter Hammond to the show. What's going on there, Hunter?
Just sitting here with you.
Chilling out here. I see a lot of people are making dinner or dessert out there in the chat. So, yeah, starting to get a little hungry, but at least I got the beer here to tide us over here, right? So
took your lead.
Yes. The what are you drinking? The pumpkin
pumpkin porter, local brewery, Four Peaks.
Nice. Yeah, I've got a local little sip of sunshine, a little single IPA, a local brewer here in Vermont. So, all right, Hunter. What's going on with Hunter? Hunter is a hobbyist who is also an expert on the captive care of all reef-safe wrasses. He is known as the Wrasse Guy, and you can learn more about this passion of his at wrasseguy.com. So we're going to talk about wrasses as well as the latest on the situation at Reef to Reef concerning the LGBT community. Some more background on Hunter. He has a 270-gallon peninsula reef featuring numerous rare wrasses, and he has written many articles about these fish. He was a speaker at Macna 2017, RAP 2019, and a panelist at Mini-Macna in 2021. In his local community, Hunter has acted as the club president for AZ FRAG for several years. That's a local reef club, I assume?
Yeah. Yep. It's a local reef club here in Phoenix. We're the only Masman chapter in the state.
Nice. Additionally, on a national level, he is involved with the Rainbow Reefers. He has been in the marine hobby since 2009 and lives in Phoenix, Arizona with his husband and their Thai Ridgeback dog. For his day job, Hunter is a structures engineer. Structures or structural?
Either or. It's, tomato. In
the aerospace propulsion engine industry. Whoa, that's some serious stuff.
Some days are more serious than others. But
gotcha.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So before we start chatting with Hunter, I want to just thank the sponsors for this show, Bulk Reef Supply and Ecotech Marine. I really appreciate these companies supporting the live stream, and I also appreciate all you folks tuning in. Please spread the word. Remember to hit that like button. We're almost up to 50 concurrent viewers right now. Only 12 likes, so we got to bump up that like count so more people can find the stream. As always, I encourage questions, comments, and Paul, the moderator, will help me sift through that stuff. So, Hunter, let's start in terms of your reef keeping journey and how you kind of got into it, and what's been your journey along the way.
Yeah. First off, thanks for having me. I didn't say that yet, and I certainly should have. Definitely looking forward to this. Okay, I started in about 2009, end of 2009, beginning of 2010. And it as a kid, I always kept the reptiles. And I still have a couple snakes for that matter. Different story. They're around 30 years old. So, Wow. I always did reptiles as a kid. Kind of why I did have a terrarium at one point or a vivarium rather, that had some water in it with toads and that sort of thing. So never really did salt at all as a kid. Mom always wanted to do a saltwater tank. And so, I guess the seed was planted a long time ago. And it really wasn't up until post-college and, starting a career and having a paycheck that all of a sudden it kind of made me go, hey, maybe I could do that. I had space in my living room at that time at the house I was currently in, and I literally had the debate if I wanted to do a saltwater tank or if I wanted to do a red-eyed tree frog kind of exhibit set up. And I went the direction of saltwater, and it's been there ever since. That first tank was like a 120 long, which is an oddball style. I don't think you can even really see or find much anymore. No. Dimensions were terrible. Knowing what I know now with some experience, narrow and tall, just all around bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and before we started the stream, we were talking about making mistakes, and that first system, lots of mistakes, right? It it was shoved in a corner. It was just one of those. It was a hang on back overflow. I thought I had an idea of what I was doing and just really didn't at all. It wasn't a bad system, but it certainly wasn't great. I went to a DSA 190 after that, until I moved back in 2016 and then set up the 270 Peninsula at that time. I've also got the Seahorse tank right now. That's a more recent thing. I had a little 20-gallon frag tank in a corner that just didn't really see a whole lot of usage. And the Seahorse thing is a side story in itself that my husband has always wanted them. And, when I first got into this, it was, hey, can you put Seahorses in there? And it's like, not really. You need a dedicated setup. And so I don't know. It's always kind of been one of those things. I started thinking about last year, mid-year, summertime, doing something different with that tank. And the Seahorse idea was brought up again, and I'd really attribute the push over the ledge to Felicia at Macna, talking about it with her, and it was like, yeah, you should definitely do it. You'd be fine. And so now there's a Seahorse tank in the corner.
Well, so yeah, Hunter passed along some video for both of those tanks, and we'll take a quick look at that. I see we're getting some comments about the reef to reef stuff. So why don't we, Hunter, address that? And I think there's some folks that don't know what's going on, some that do. So could you just kind of give us a summation of the what's going on with reef to reef and the LGBT community, and where it kind of stands at this point in time?
Yeah, I'd love to. It's a longer story. I'll try to just stick to the bullet points, and if we want to dissect more from there, we certainly can. So this all stems back to late 2020 into early 21. It was really October 2020 when it kind of first bubbled up as a thing, but a trans man had made a thread, I believe in the lounge at that point in time, that was just looking for other queer people in the hobby. And at that time, I was a moderator in Reef to Reef. I had been for like 7-8 years at that point. Had a lot of interaction with the people that ran things and behind the scenes and whatnot. There could be lots of stuff to talk about there. But I had never, of course, I wouldn't have given my time and whatever to that site for that period of time had I ever thought that there was, a negative stance towards the LGBTQ community. And up until October of that time, I really hadn't seen anything that was that way. Now, I had known for a long time at that point, of course, prior to even becoming a moderator there, that the owner of the site, David Hammond, he is a evangelist preacher, reverend. He has his own church. It's really his father's church who started it. It is a sub-chapter of a larger evangelist church that the name has just flown out of my head now. I'd have to go back and look it up. But, so those that know a bit about the evangelist branch, they tend to not be so kind to, anyone who is not a straight white person. Let's just put it that way. And the right-hand man of the site at that time, and still today, is Daniel Bannister, who is also in that church community, if you will. He is a Southern Baptist church planner. He's lived around the country and has been in California for a few years now. There's some side tangent with that I could share even too, that, I have had several conversations with him over the years, nothing since early 21. I had even sat down and had dinner with his family before, while they passed through Phoenix one time. So there was no bad blood or anything there ahead of time, but, actions speak louder than words when push came. Okay, enough background about those folks. So in October, a trans van put up a thread about, hey, is there any other queer people in the hobby? And it was there for a few days. And then it kind of got a bit hostile in the thread, and, some bigoted folks said some things that they shouldn't have, and things got reported, and then it bubbled up in the back room, and David just pretty much went and shut it down, just pulled the thread out, and made it sent it to the removed, effectively the deleted from public view section. And it was kind of like well, wait a minute, what's really the problem here? That's not a problem with the thread, right? The problem is the people who came in and said some things they shouldn't have and made it be hostile.
Right.
But okay, deal with that problem,
Right.
right? Don't just take the thread away.
Right. You want to be civil in those kind of exchanges online.
Right. Right. So it felt like a solution, or rather a problem looking for a solution, right? It was like, well, wait a second, that's not the right problem to deal with. And so it didn't sit right with me, but we kind of just moved on. And then come December of 2020, so I guess part of it too is the Rainbow Reefers had already became a thing at that point, and we had a Facebook group. It's a private group, but people can ask to join it, and myself and a few other people moderate that group. And as long as you don't appear as someone who has no business being there, we are not opposed to letting anybody in. It's not a secret club by any means. But anyhow, it came up to someone else's attention in that group that this trans man had their thread removed back, in October, 2 months before. And it was like, well, wait a minute, that's not right. Why did that happen? And so this individual in the group went and started another thread that was just, looking for other LGBTQ people in the hobby, just a common interest thread in the lounge. And it didn't last, but maybe like 4 hours or
really?
so. It was gone pretty quickly. And so, now, okay, big red flags. And a lot of discussion in the back room. And there's a lot of this that leaked out on Humblefish over the years too. So right away within the moderator pool on Reef to Reef, if you will, there was kind of a pretty big split right down the middle. There were those on my side that were going, this is not the right thing to do. You're not dealing with the right problem. You should not be discriminating against this group of people. And then there was, a handful of others on his side going, oh, it has nothing to do with reefing. It shouldn't be a topic of conversation.
The conversations were going on a lounge, which has got nothing to do with reefing.
Right. And so there's that, right? Like, it's in the lounge, it's where it should be. And then the exact analogous parallel to all of it is there's other threads in there of, women in reefing, barbecuing and reefing, all kinds of common interest things. And it's like, how it's no different than any of those. And, through, and I, understand how someone of an evangelist background would trip on this, right? Because he was adamant that no, this is a topic of sexual nature. It's like, no, it is absolutely not. It is more sexual in nature than the women in reefing thread. This is about people's identity. This is not a conversation about sex. Go look in the women in reefing thread. There's not talk in there of menstrual cycles and sexual positions, right? Like, that's not happening in there. It wouldn't be happening in the wow, I'm stumbling on my own words. LGBTQ thread either, it just wouldn't.
Right. There's online forums in terms of the appropriate nature of the conversations that are going on. It's there are, I guess, limitations, but it sounds like there was just a broad decision made about anybody with the LGBTQ in that community.
Yeah, right. So then it went from bad to worse. And, as this issue bubbled up and, it came to broader attention, more people got aware of it, he went on a purge then. And he literally purged any thread from the site, back from like 10 years before, any thread that had gay, lesbian, LGBTQ, any of those phrases in the thread title, they all vanished. Up in one night, just all gone in a poof.
Wow.
It was like, well, wait a minute. And so other people tested this theory then too. Like, is it just the words in the thread title? And, lo and behold, anytime someone would start a thread like that or change the title to a build thread with those words, it quickly got fixed, erased. So now the problem's fundamental. Again, the big split, I had people on my side. The change.org petition, we haven't talked about that yet, but I know you've got a link to it.
Yep, it's in the video description.
Great. That I encourage anyone who is, just hearing this for the first time, please go take a look at that. It's all very detailed and outlined in there. Also, take a look at the 2 updates to that petition. There's 2 of them that both have some key details also. I am not afraid to say that I am the one behind that petition. All that information came from me and could be confirmed by the other moderators who were, on my side. It is what it is. It's gotten over 3,000 signatures at this point, and he has completely dug his heels in. And we had one last conversation, David and I, back in late December of 2020, and I'm sure we'll never have another one. I tried to, reach out to Daniel Bannister even too, and kind of appeal to him, like, how are you standing idly by on this? Because prior to this, he was very, pro Black Lives Matter. It was on the heels of George Floyd, and he was all about that from a social issue. And then on this issue, it was just completely nil, right? It's like, how can you possibly stand up for that and say nothing here? And he completely ghosted me. So I'm sure we'll never have a conversation again either.
Others have been impacted as well, right? You're not the only one that was discriminated against, right?
Yeah, sure. I could give you a list of a couple dozen people real easily that all had content erased or deleted. And then, anyone who, even just allies within the community that were making noise about this. So all of those people then got put on moderated posts where they can post things, but it shows up in a moderator's queue to where their posts have to be approved before they're publicly visible. So they completely controlled the narrative. They shut down all the conversation they didn't want people to be saying about it, and just, hushed the whole thing. And then there was one thread, it was a Those Who Love Rainbows thread that, it's all euphemisms and whatnot that's talked about in there. No one used the words that they didn't want to see, so they let that stand. There's some people today that think that thread's gotten locked now in the last 6 months or so. Thanks for the signatures. I started watching the comments.
We've got some interesting comments. Tony D300G, fish and corals aren't Christian. I like that. Also says some fish can change sexes. Okay. Robbie Z Reef, I was already on the fence about leaving that place due to leadership, but when I caught wind of this, I left and don't want anything to do with that. I signed that petition. Yeah, I mean, personally, I haven't, since I got wind of this, I haven't engaged in any, conversations on Reef to Reef. I haven't been on Reef to Reef. So, it's unfortunate that this has to, be going on in the world that we live in today. I mean, it's such a progressive society, you would think, and to see this kind of discrimination going on, it's just not right. We're all reef keepers, right? We all have this commonality, and there's purple reef keepers and there's green reef keepers and whatever, however you want to put, labels on people, but we're all, got the same interests at heart, and we're all passionate about the same thing. And the fact that people are making judgments about others in that regard is, kind of hard to take, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that was what really burned me about it too, because it's like you are driving a wedge in the community, like you are creating division, like you're not being a loving, uniting community. You are doing the exact opposite, and that was not the message he had, pun maybe intended. That was not the message he had preached for years. Suddenly it was just completely opposite, and of course, I had some sleepless nights about all this while it was going down and whatnot for a few weeks there, and. At some point in time, you start to question yourself and, think about, did I make a bigger thing about this than what it is? And this is not in the petition, but some people have heard this from me in other places. And some people caught it when it happened. Then a Sunday, maybe 3 weeks after all this had happened, maybe even 2 weeks, a Sunday after that, David Hammond did a sermon, and it was broadcast on the church's Facebook page because it was still in the pandemic and they were doing, remote Sunday sermons. And his whole sermon was how they were at war with the devil. And that's what it was all on. And, it was very clear to me that, listening to this from the outside, that either I was the devil or I was representing the devil, but whatnot. It was way too timely and spot on for this to be the thing. And I even had some other people, in the background that were really working with me when all of it was happening. That pinged me on it, that were like, "Have you seen this yet?" And he's like, "Yeah, no, I have." But that was so telling right then that it pretty much made me at ease and really click that this was not just me making it bigger than what it was. It really was that.
Yeah. Sponsors, right? Sponsors have been there's been some sponsors that I understand. Well, I don't want to make assumptions, and some sponsors have left, but I guess
Yes.
they have. Okay.
Yes. Coral View. That was the reason they completely pulled out. So I've been in this hobby for 12 years now. I go to Macna every year.
Were you there the last Macna?
I was. Yeah.
I missed you. I was the only Macna I've ever been to.
Well, if you're in Pittsburgh, I'll say
yeah.
And so not to toot my own horn, but I've met a fair bit of people over the years, and have built a pretty decent network. So I had some key resources, vocals that I could and did reach out to while this was happening, and going, hey, what can you help me with? What can you do, or what advice do you have? And I got a lot, but I certainly had some people that were in right positions, and I'm being vague because I don't want to make them publicly known on what they did, because they did it very hush hush, from the channels they had. But there were some of those people who put pressure on some of those key sponsors and made them aware of what was happening. And Coral View is the biggest example of they saw it, they reviewed all of it, and they quietly stepped away. They didn't make it known why they were leaving, but we knew.
John Gordon, there are way too many companies that will not talk about this, and most of the hobbyists are unaware of the issues. John Wright, I can't believe we need to have this conversation. We're all humans and reefers. Surely there's no discrimination between reefers. So what else can folks do? Folks can reach out to sponsors just to make sure that they're aware of this, correct?
Yeah, we some of the newer sponsors may be unaware, but anyone who was a sponsor at the 2020-21 timeframe, they all were aware because we reached out to them. We kind of put a campaign out, if you will, to put some pressure on sponsors to make them aware, and they were certainly all made aware. We got some pushback from a lot of them in the sense of, I don't like, the common message was this, and it sucks. It was, I don't like what's happening, but I don't endorse it, and I can't afford to pull out of Reef to Reef because they provide me too much, broad reach for my business. And that's disheartening to hear, but at the same time, it's like, well, I don't want to, put someone in a bad financial position because they are no longer a sponsor.
Right.
So we did try to soften the message a little bit at that point, because some of them also saw it as threatening on the message we were giving them of you have to leave Reef to Reef or else we're going to do this. And it's like, well, no, it's not so much of a threat, but okay, maybe it wasn't done the best way it could have been.
So besides a forum like this, and besides the petition, what else are you guys doing in terms of outreach to try to raise the visibility of this issue, or is that kind of what the main forums have been?
So there's been a lot of discussion and a lot of reach on Humblefish, because Bobby's who runs that, and Bobby was a former moderator from Reef to Reef as well. I'm sure he'd tell his own story on that, but he left the site prior to all this happening, and was kind of burned by a lot of things that had happened too. So he was very open and receptive to giving us an open seat. Reefs.com did the same thing. They gave us some airtime in a section on their forum. That didn't get a whole lot of traction, unfortunately, but it was a nice gesture for sure. We did try to reach out to some of the bigger social organizations, HRC, the ACLU. I and myself from some of the other Rainbow Reefers did reach out to them and try to see if we could get anything there, and really no bites. It really much turns into, it's too much of a niche thing for them to put their resources on. And I get it, because they're looking at it going, well, okay, it's an issue with a private entity who is ultimately free to do what they want,
right? Which
is true. And what sucks is what I've already outlined, that he just buries it. That's his solution to dealing with it, is just not let people know that it's happening.
So nothing has really changed since the initial issue had popped up. There's really no movement on that side of the fence.
No, I don't ever see it happening. I don't see his side of the fence ever moving. He's double down, triple down, whatever at this point. So we have talked about, how do we get more awareness, and it's kind of stalled out over the last couple of years. But one thing I would like to resurrect this year, and I've got a few people to help me do it, is just to reach out to all the local clubs we can possibly come up with. Make all the clubs known around the country aware of it, and then they can do what they so choose to do. But that's been the more recent conversation. It's just how do we spread awareness to all these people who have no idea.
Yep. I'm just looking at the comments. Paul signed. Thank you. Petition. Yep. Okay. All right, man. So anything else you wanted to say on that front before we switch gears? As we talked about before, if you folks out there want to sign this petition, the link for it is in the video description, as well as the update, right? I think about the situation. There's also another link in there about the update on the situation. So please check those out if you want to help, with this issue. What did change is Rev never comes on shows like this where he could be asked questions. That's Andy. Yeah, I did reach out to David Rev a couple of times to get him on the show, and honestly, I didn't know what was going on at the time in terms of this issue, so he declined, and I haven't really had any communication with him in a while, but I'm not sure he would, if he was on the show, that he'd be talking about it. So that's perhaps a reason why he's not going to be too excited to come on.
No, I'm sure he would tell you what he told all the sponsors at the time, that it was, and this is captured in the petition too, but one of the sponsors asked about it, and he basically said, "Oh, there's a few people causing a ruckus, and we're just dealing with those people, and we're not removing content." It was a half truth for sure. And again, hopefully this one trickles back to Rev, but I had enough friends and folks at the time that I could reach out to a few of the sponsors and ask, hey, what's getting said over in these areas? And people sent me screenshots. I know exactly what he told those people, even after he removed that whole section from the moderators being able to see. I've only touched on, maybe like 60% of all the, crap that happened with it. But that was one of the things, sections that all the moderators could see for years prior to that, he started removing from view from all the moderators because it was too hard to keep the lies straight, right? If people could see things.
So a few comments here. Adam Frag Garage petitions in the video description. There's a link in the video description. All right, so Michael Baldwin, I guess maybe I'm missing an earlier comment. That's my point. He makes the rules, and if he wants to stay, I abide by them. Andy Scott Oliphant, Michael Baldwin, I think you're missing the point. There are unequal rules on reef-to-reef posts relating to us are being deleted, but other off-topic ones are not. Andy and lots of people left reef to reef, and humble fish grew. Sean Clark, I had no idea this was an issue. Scott, exactly, it's an age-old religious prosecution, discrimination of LGBTQs. That is what's behind it. Reef Girl, hey Cindy, I don't do forums. Hearing this blows my mind. Religion has a lot to answer for when it comes to doing the opposite of the supposed Christian tenet of live and let live. Takes guts for you to fight it. I agree.
Yeah. Well, thanks.
Yeah.
I tried to do what I could, I see another comment in here too of we need Ben and Rich from Reef Beef. I did an episode.
Yeah,
with them.
I saw
I
that.
don't number off the top of my head, but it's in one of the early ones, like 15 or less. But
yeah, go check.
Yeah, we talked about it for like 30, 40 minutes on there one time.
Go check out that episode. It's a really good episode. Surf Zone Aquatics, laugh out loud. I can no longer post on Reef to Reef because of this. Yes, the live view of the monitors. Okay, so yes, all right. We've got a lot of people that are chatting about this, but we'll all right. We'll shift gears a little bit, talk about wrasses, but we could always come back to this if the chat sways the show that way. We'll certainly not ignore the comments. This is obviously a very important topic to discuss, and yeah, I mean, Hunter, whatever you think you need to do in terms of further discussing this, I am open to that for sure. Yeah. All right, wrasses. You're the wrasse guy. How did you become fascinated with wrasses?
How? I don't even know if I can explain the how. It's just one of those. I don't know. Like some people get really into tangs or angels. I suppose it was just wrasses for me. The why maybe being that there's a whole lot of diversity and variety there. And they're also really great reef fish. I kind of saw that problem with angels. I think is a good example. There's a lot of people who really love angels, but there's a lot of them that munch on corals. So things like that were never all that appealing to me. So I don't know. It just kind of became the fish I honed in on at the beginning, and it snowballed from there.
What do you remember? Which wrasse you first started with?
Yeah. I've told this story before. I know I started at my Macna presentation here, but the short version is I bought a little Labuti at a local store. It was like a couple inches. I'll always remember the price tag. It was $119. It was the first expensive
That's
fish
pricey.
I bought.
Yeah.
Prior to that point, it was like it was, and this is back like 2010 time frame. So. I had bought a couple clowns at that point, and that was about it. But anyhow, so bought a little Labuti wrasse, Cerulopris labuti, and I had done my research, right, like everyone should, and I had the tank fully covered. It was covered with egg crate, and I bought the fish, brought it home. This was prior to knowing the importance of QT, but again, early days. Put it in the main tank. I watched it that afternoon, evening, went to bed. Woke up the next morning, came down, looked at the tank. I'm looking for my new wrasse. I'm going, where is the fish? And it was daylight enough where it's like should have been out by now. Not really sure. And I looked for probably 2-3 minutes, and then I looked down at the floor, and there it was. and it was small enough where it had gone right through the egg crate.
Whoa.
And then to add insult to injury, it had been there for hours at that point. So it was completely dry, and it was on a tile floor, and it was stuck to the floor.
I once had we talked about this when a couple of days ago when we did a little quick test via Skype. I love Chioti leopard wrasses, and I've had two in my reef keeping career. And so the second one I had, which was in the current tank I'm running, right, one of my current display tanks, I don't have screens on my top of my tanks, but I've got Euro bracing, and that was another question for me. Is like that was going to have for you, but we could talk about that in a little bit. But anyway, I kept Chioti leopard wrasses for years without any issues, but this one probably I had them for like 3 years. I came home, and there it was on the tile floor, and it was dried. It was like freeze dried. So I was like, oh shit! And I picked it up, and I don't know how dry. It wasn't like stiff as a board, but it looked pretty darn dry to me. I put it in the tank, and it resuscitated and lived for another couple years before it jumped again. And then I didn't see it jump, and then of course that was that. But so yeah,
I've heard those stories before. I haven't ever done that one myself, but I've heard people put a dried fish in the tank and it was still alive.
And I've got a live webcam on my tank, so I was trying to do the replay of the event in terms of when it jumped out, and I knew exactly the time frame, and for some reason the live webcam didn't capture the thing jumping out. I just thought that was odd. It was like somebody was covering something up there, and I don't know, but a stupid side note. So
was it fast enough that it was like
maybe
the frame rate of the camera?
Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe it just couldn't get captured because it was so quick. All right, so I'm seeing a lot of questions about wrasses in the chat, and let's run some video of your current tank and kind of talk about the 270-gallon Peninsula tank. I know you sent this to me, and there was like some heavy blue light. I tried to like take out some of the blue light, but really cool tank.
It's really not that blue. I know I told you this, but to the eye, it's like a 14K halide. That's where I like to keep my tanks. And then I put the cell phone camera on it, and it's like, why does this look like Windex? But yeah.
So yeah, just tell us a little about this tank and the inhabitants.
So it's a 270 Peninsula. It's 6x3x2 acrylic tank. Tiny plug to a local company, but Titan Aquatic is here in town.
Okay.
They do big stuff. They do like public aquariums and big displays. So they don't do a whole lot of small work. Even the hobbyists in town, they don't do a whole lot for. But one of the guys that's on the club board with me has worked there for several years, and so a resource to use. Anyhow, so they did the tank itself. They also did the sump for me. I know one of those video clips I sent you, I kind of just did a walk around of the stand and the equipment as well.
Yeah, we're looking at that right now.
Yeah, great. So tank setups and system design, if you will, has always been a thing for me that I pay attention to. Call it the engineer in me. But I make a point to try to get my electronics and the sparky bits away from the wet area. So I like to have a wet and a dry area in my stand.
Yep.
So that's part of the stand design. Is there's actually a divider in it about it's kind of like a 2/3, 1/3 kind of division.
Yeah.
And so the front cabinet is where all the electronics are at, and the dry space, if you will, and then the sump and everything wet is on the other 2/3 of the stand. Equipment wise, it's a Fluval SP6 return pump that pretty much runs everything. I manifold off of that. I run some carbon GFO, I run a calcium reactor. There's like a 20-gallon ATO in there. Lighting right now, I just changed this over at the end of the year, but I've got 4 Kessel 500s on it and a couple Reef Bright strips. I've done all kinds of different lighting over the years. I had T5s in the tank now for the last probably 4 or 5 years. Didn't dislike it. It just was ready to lose a little bit of heat in the room from the T5s and went to the LEDs. What else? There's a couple Panta 42s on it that run in like a gyre sense.
Those are some serious pumps.
Yeah, I really like them. I had Ecotech MP60s on it for several years, and they were okay. I didn't hate them, but there were some downsides. The holes in them or the slots, the spacing in the slots, if you will, is kind of big, and definitely lost some fish in those. I heard them called fish killers for years, long time, and I didn't really believe it. I believe it now. So there's a couple Panta 42s, and there's also a Tunzi. Oh, I forget what model number it is. It's one of the big ones. Got a wide flow on it, and I've got that set to just basically do a wave in the tank.
And you've got it's like a mixed reef too, right? I mean, in terms of the corals you have in that tank.
Yeah, correct. It's mostly stonies. I like to kind of how it's aquascaped. It's got the taller stuff on the back end of the tank, if you will, and then it kind of tapers down to the peninsula end, and the LPS are more on that side. One of my long-term goals is I want to keep the view perspective down the tank, right? So where you can always stand at the front of the tank and look all the way at the back. So the corals are laid out a bit strategically for that.
Yeah, I have a pretty similar tank to what you have. I have a 225-gallon Peninsula tank, so it's 6 foot long by 3 foot wide, but only 20 inches tall. So okay. I'm more into the SPS, so it's a real SPS dominant type of tank, and height wasn't that big of a deal for me. But the challenge is the flow, in a Peninsula tank, and trying to make it so it's not obtrusive, right? And I started out with 4 MP40s at the end with the the external overflow box, to try to hide it that way as best as I could, but with the SPS and the polyps and what have you, I was not getting good polyps were not really moving on the other side of the tank. So I ended up adding, I added 2 MP60s. So instead of having 4 MP40s at the end of the tank, I have 2 MP60s and 2 MP40s, and then I added, I put the 2 other MP40s at the other end, the viewing end panel of that tank. So I wanted to try to avoid doing that, but I'm used to looking at it now, and it doesn't bug me, and I know it's best for the critters in my tank. But it is a challenge, right? I mean, in terms of getting that kind of flow going. But the pan arrays, that's some serious pushing power.
Yeah, I really like those. I mean, they're the flow pattern is really different on them. It's a very narrow jet, but so okay, just use that to your advantage. So, but yeah, a 6-foot reach is totally possible with them.
Wow. All right, so let's talk about fish. What kind of wrasses do you have in the tank? I see Andy is asking, what is your longest lived colorful wrasse? My fairy wrasse only lasts a year or two. We can get into the specific stuff. But what do you have right now in the tank in terms of wrasses? Rare wrasses, right?
Yeah, it's a revolving door for sure, because yeah, they do have a limited lifespan. So let me touch on that really first before I completely forget it. I like to buy my stuff at a smaller juvenile size for 2 reasons. One, it's a little bit cheaper. Not that that's really the primary driver, but the biggest thing is the lifespan. If you buy smaller ones, you get to watch them grow up and you get to keep them longer. You'll see the biggest price tags on the super males, or the ones that are most showy and colorful, which is fine if you're just in for the immediate satisfaction. But back to the lifespans not being super long for some of the species, you don't really know how old those fish are, and they might only have 6 months left. That's the reality.
Wow.
So I forgot the name you said, if you had the comment there, and I'm not looking fast enough here.
Andrew.
But,
yeah.
Yeah. So it's possible that Andrew had something that was, already old to begin with, if you will. Okay. I do like to buy my stuff smaller. That occasionally doesn't work out. MP60s are a bad recipe. The worst one was a candy bass. And he went head first into it.
That really must have hurt.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. And it was one of those where it's like, I know there's something wrong with that fish. Like, I had just seen him, 2 hours before that, and he was just fine. Anyhow, so currently what's in there? I've started to diversify a little bit in the last 6 months, I'd say, and some of that is just some problems that I've had with the tank. And Rich Ross did a thing at Macna talking about, herbivores, and if you look at wild reefs, you'll see the patches that are always kept somewhat algae free are those with herbivores. And if you have an area where there's not many, there tends to be more algae. And it's like, yeah, okay, it's pretty elementary, but I had never really thought of it that way. So my more recent additions are, one, a copper band. That's to deal with the aptasia that have popped up in the last year. I had a marginalis butterfly prior to that for several years. Did a great job of keeping the tank clean. But a year after he was gone, and it's like, oh, I'm starting to raise an aptasia farm now, and that's not. There's other people that are going to say, oh, you have other solutions. It's like, yeah, but my tank full of wrasses, nudibranchs won't work. I've tried it. That's a waste of money.
Have you tried peppermints?
I have, but again, kind of same problem with some of the wrasses. They may go after them. Hit and miss. I don't think I've tried it with ones I currently have, but yeah, maybe worth a try again. So anyhow, copper band, there's an Achilles tang in there, and also a scribbled rabbitfish. I can't think of the Latin right now, but I really had grabbed the rabbit because I've got a Caldiferopsis, I think. I'd have to go back and see if I got that right. But I've got a wiry green algae in there that's kind of an oddball, and it's one of those where it has been known to be, a tank teardown for people to get rid of it. Rabbitfish will eat it. So that's the only reason I have him. Otherwise, it wouldn't have appealed to me. So some function there. And the Achilles I wasn't too worried about because, there's a lot of flow in that tank, and I thought I'd be fine with it. He's been in there several months now. Sorry, enough about those guys. I also have a Tomini tang that I've had that might be the fish I've had the longest. Nice. No, I've got a clown I've had longer, but I've had that Tomini tang for probably 10 years. I'd have to go back and look. Parrot clownfish, one of those was one of the first fish I ever bought. I lost the female a few years ago for no reason at all. Things happen. But I've got another old time female in there now with my original male. That's a story in itself. But it was a local breeder of clownfish that was completely getting out of the hobby after he was commercially scaled breeder for a long time. And this was his original pair of clownfish, and he had just recently lost the male. And so I have his female that's 20 some years old now. But,
Whoa. Wow.
Anyhow, enough of the non-wrasse fish. So wrasse wise right now in there, and I may miss a few. I'm just going to go off the top of my head, but there is a black leopard. There's a Vivian leopard, a Potter's leopard.
Nice.
There is a jeweled
jeweled leopard wrasse.
People call them a jeweled leopard, right? But technically they're a halochorus. That's it's kind of an in-between species, or even the classification of them was not super clear, but they're technically a halochorus. There's a halochorus richmondi in there. That's a species you don't see very often, but it's super, super pretty. The blue stripes on that guy are iridescent, like the Femininus. I do have a Femininus in there as well. What else? There's a Lineatus, a rhomboid. I've got a little Earls and Earli and QT right now. I had an Earli a long time prior to that. I should go back and look and see how long I kept that Earli. But it was from juvie size to full grown and old, and I knew it was coming. It was one of those where if you do this long enough, they start to get a look to them and a body shape, and they just start to turn into an old fish, and you can see it. And I saw it with him, and I knew it was coming. And so that was a few months ago. So got a new Earls. I'm definitely missing some.
What do you not have that you would like to have?
Oh, that's an endless list. And some of those are simply ones that are unobtainable, which maybe is part of the appeal. I guess one of the ones that's been at the top of the unattainable list for a long time is the purple boned. They come out of the Red Sea. And that's kind of the problem. Where they're most known is off of Sudan, and they can be collected there, but, trade embargoes, we can't take anything from Sudan. And they're also known up by Egypt, but, no one collects up there. So maybe someday, but until then. Sanguinus is another really cool species down in the Mauritius. There was a little bit of collection of those a few years back. It was a specific trip. And, somebody on a rebreather went down deep to get them. And then it turned into a mess after that because they kind of got held for extortion fees a little bit along the way. And it didn't go as planned, but some did come to the States. And I had an opportunity, but it was just a price tag that I just wasn't willing to do.
Everybody has their limit, right?
Yeah, the fish that was probably the most rare that I ever kept was a Claire's wrasse. And this was, so Cerulopris Claire, there's kind of a split there where there's two different variants of them. There's the one that's actually the described variant, that's the one I kept. And then there's some that came out of the Cooks a few years ago. No, I said that backwards. The original is from the Cooks. There's some that came out of my memory is failing me. It was where Rufus collected peppermint angels, but he collected the other variety at the same time. So there's been a few more of those than the Cook Islands original variant, but there was 5 of them that came into the States, and I had grabbed one of them, and I paid a couple grand for that fish, and I kept it for about 6-7 years, and same thing, just kind of got the old look, and I knew it was coming, and went away. The thing I'm mad about is that it vanished in the tank on me. I had a plan to, pull it out and take fin clips, send it off to the taxonomists because they all wanted, the DNA samples.
Yeah.
And I couldn't deliver.
Wow. Yeah. That sounds like an awesome fish. Let's take some of the questions from the chat here. Vivid Creative Aquatics. Hunter, what is the typical lifespan of a yellow chorus wrasse in an aquarium? I've had 2 and lost both at around 6 to 7 year mark. The most recent one just a few weeks ago. I guess it also depends in terms of how old that fish is when you get it.
Right, and so this is always a fun topic, but because the people always want to know how long do they live, and so the first caveat there is we don't really know. I have my own personal thoughts and experience that I've collected over the years, and people definitely agree that it's genus dependent. Um, some genera are definitely longer lived than others. Halichorus are kind of in the middle. My personal thoughts there is they probably live about 8 to 10 years on average. But yeah, the important point is, well, how old was it when you got it? And so that's easy to kind of gauge if it's a smaller juvie because it's probably a year or two, no more. But once it's a bigger size than that, it's kind of all bets are off. So I vivid that's Antonio. He's local to me. He's in my club too. But so Antonio, my answer is that that's probably about the right time frame if it was mid-size when you bought it.
Right. A couple of things here. So one question I have for you is, so certain wrasses can be difficult to keep, right? And if you're getting juveniles, does that make it even tougher to keep those that are difficult?
Yeah, it can. And so I guess so like fairies and flashers, I don't hesitate at all to get them as juveniles. They're some of the easiest. Like a juvenile leopard, if it was really small, yeah, that's going to be a challenge, and that's not even one I would willfully take on. So how small I'm willing to go depends on the genus as well.
What where can you get a juvenile fish besides, obviously, I guess a local fish store is a great place to request some sort of juvenile fish, right? Because the local fish store can make a request to their supplier to say, hey, I got a customer that's interested in a certain fish, but they'd like it on the smaller side. So that's my first question. Then my second question, to those of us that don't have a local fish store anywhere close by, what online vendors would you say are good places to shop for fish?
Some of the big box stores do a pretty decent job of classifying sizes on their sales too. One that comes to mind quickly is like Blue Zoo, but it's not unique to them by any means. But they will list out a certain species by size, and usually the bigger it is, the more expensive it is too. Of course, sometimes they get it wrong. You might buy one that says 2 to 3 inches, and it shows up and it's like 4, but okay. But generally they're pretty good about it. Who else? This is the point in time where 4 or 5 years ago or before I would have mentioned live aquaria.
It's changed, right?
It has, and there's a reason why it has. The ownership has completely changed over. Kevin Cohen, who was the director for years, is no longer with the company. Yeah. He left with the ownership change, and the last 2-3 years, it's certainly they've gotten into shaving the margin and making everything pencil out better. And I hate to say that it's being ran into the ground, but personally, I kind of feel like it is. And I've quit using them as a vendor, to be perfectly frank. I've gone to a lot of the smaller vendors, and it's not like I have preferential names here, but and places that you might spend more to get what you want. But Eric Cohen has a new site, TankStop. I think it's tankstop.com, but he also took over Among the Reef. Oh. So that can be a good source too. I've bought several fish from marine collectors. That's Elliott Lim in the LA area. Gotcha. Some of the California vendors are a little bit easier for me because stuff gets here overnight really easy from California, from there to Arizona. It's usually like one flight from Oakland to Phoenix, and that's it.
Right. Yep. Yeah, it's a challenge for me because I used to use live aquaria all the time, and I got actually my second Chioti wrasse I got from live aquaria, and it lived for like 3 years, and I'm not exactly sure how I pulled that off because that's an extremely tough leopard wrasse, and you can't even find those things hardly anymore. I guess maybe there are certain times of the year that they're more prevalent than other times of the year. But yeah, I had Bobby Miller on from Humble Fish a number of weeks ago, and we were talking about that in terms of like what would you say are good places to get fish online besides a local fish store. And we were also talking about quarantining. So you mentioned that you have a quarantine tank set up. What kind of setup is that?
I don't have a permanent quarantine set up. I you know, put it up and take it down as I need
Okay.
to. And it's not fancy. I don't do QT in a glamorous fashion by any means. But I've got like a 10-gallon tank and a 20-gallon tank, and you know what I use depends on what I'm doing. Um, but I'll set them up on the fly. I do, you know, fresh water in them, and I'll put some just poly filter and a hang-on back filter and go. And I'll do, you know, weekly water changes on them and just keep it updated.
Yep. And what meds do you use when you you know, purchase a fish and put it in that tank?
So in typical reef fashion, it depends. Some of it depends on, you know, who I get it from. If you deal with a vendor long enough, you kind of, you know, learn how much to trust them, if you
Yeah.
will. You know, not that I think I can wholly trust anyone, because I don't. I never have.
No, you can't trust. You
But
can't trust anybody. I mean, you know, I'm a big SPS nut, and I don't care who I get an SPS frag from. I'm dipping that thing. You know,
yeah,
I'm not taking
yeah.
a chance, even though I know that that person, organization, company, whatever, is like, you know, at the top of the you know, the list in terms of the way they keep their
And
systems, and you just can't. You gotta like just be sure and do it yourself.
yeah, and you're cutting the base off and throwing it
Yeah,
away
yeah,
because it's not worth
yeah, for sure.
it. Yeah. So in a blanket sense, I'll always do Prezi Quantal. You can do Prezi Pro, or Furin 2 has both Prezi and Metro in it. That's the thing I'll do no matter what, because you're taking care of gill flukes with that, which can be pretty common in wrasses. It's the two things you'll face the most are flukes and internal parasites, you know, worms, if you will. And so that's where Metro comes in. You can do Metro in the tank, or a little bit better, be Metro focus and soak your foods in that, and feed that. If it's from a source I trust less, or know I should trust less, then I will do prophylactically. I'll do copper. Couple key things there is use a chelated copper. So that's like copper power. Don't use cupramine or one of the ionic coppers. So know your difference on what the product is. Um, and then how you bring the system up to a therapeutic level is important. So you can go to 1 ppm pretty quickly, but then that 1 to 2-ish jump needs to be done slower with wrasses. I do it over like the course of a week. And I use a Hanna checker, Hanna copper checker. It's one of the best tools ever
Hmm.
for copper testing, because if you've been around long enough and used some of the other copper test kits, they're all super inconsistent. So Hanna checker is the way to live by, and I run it up to like 1.9 to 2. I kind of stick to that range. Instructions will tell you to go to like 2 1/4, and I've seen wrasses, you know, from like a neurological sense, get weird when it gets
Hmm.
above 2 in that 2.2 range. So I tend not to go up there. And I've never had, you know, anything sneak through that I'm aware of by staying, you know, just right under 2.
So this is a good question. Kevin Johnson is asking. I know wrasses are good pest eaters. Are there any that eat colonial hydroids? I have them spreading around my tank from a frag of zoas. Brown.
No, sorry.
No, nothing, huh?
All wrasses are pretty much carnivores. So, you know, the things that they might eat, they're not going to be a hydroid. I don't even know what might eat hydroids for that matter. I'm sure there's a nudibranch that does. You know, things that eat aptasias, you might have some chance with. But yeah,
What about flatworms? What, like acro-eating flatworms? You know, I think there's always like I always like see kind of like anecdotal, um, you know, evidence or whatever you want to say that oh, you know, I've got acro-eating flatworms, but I got a bunch of wrasses in my tank, and they help you know, keep that population in check. Is that true? And if so, what wrasses would you recommend for that?
it can be true. Now, I don't want to paint the wrong picture. Everyone needs to understand that it's only going to be from a management perspective. You're not going to eradicate your
Right.
flatworms with wrasses, especially acro eating. So yes, they can help you manage through that problem and live with it. Um, the genus is again important. Some genera only feed from the water column, and other ones are benthic feeders, and they'll go around and pick things off. And so those guys in the latter category, halochorus, are great ones for reef tanks. Um, huge caveat here, but pseudocalinus are also good for that. That would be like your 6-line and your mystery wrasse. Those need to be the only wrasse in the tank if you're picking one from that genera. It's really important. Don't mix those guys with any other wrasses. You're in for a bad time eventually. Leopard wrasses, maybe, but they're a little bit less of an inspector, if you will, than some of those halochorus are.
So this kind of dovetails into Insane Reefer's question. Ask Hunter what wrasses are good together. I'd love to keep a radiant wrasse with a leopard wrasse. Is that a good or a bad idea, those two?
Yeah, you'll be okay. I'd encourage, anyone who's got basic questions here. I didn't mean to degrade the question by any means, but go check out my site, please, therasseguy.com. I've got all my articles on there. I've got a long one that'll kind of walk you through some general guidelines. I always say guidelines. I never say rules because, we're dealing with live animals here. Nothing is set in stone. So those guidelines are really based off of my experience directly or some collective experience along the way. But yes, it's important to know what genera you can mix with others and which you can't. And really, it's the pseudocalinus are the ones to just flat out avoid if you're wanting to do multiple wrasses. Halochorus and leopards go fine together. The anapsis or the tamarins are also fine to throw in that mix. I keep all those in my tank together, no problem.
Yeah,
fairies and flaxes are fine together. Pretty much all of those together will be okay. There are some halochorus that you definitely would want to avoid. Halochorus is a catch-all genus, and there's like 60 plus species in there, and they're not all built the same. I'm not playing favorites here, but I saw someone much earlier, some half scanning his comments as we go, but much earlier say, I bought a Christmas wrasse, and I smirked to myself silently when I read that, because that's one thing I rant about sometimes is common names. Common names are not common. They're only common to the region that you are in at the moment, and so they're not even common across the U.S., and they're certainly not common across the world. And Christmas wrasse is the classic example that I could name you quickly 5 species that common name gets slapped on, and they're all very different. So the comment was, I don't even remember who it was, but I bought a Christmas wrasse, but I think it's Biocelatus, which is more commonly known as the red line wrasse, but some people call it the Christmas wrasse. And so, yeah, if you think it's Biocelatus, it probably is, and know that some people will call that a Christmas wrasse. And there's 3 halochorus that are called Christmas: the Biocelatus, Claudia, which is probably the one that I would advocate for that common name to only apply to, but who am I? And then Ornithassimus, which is a little bit less common in the trade now because most of them used to come out of Hawaii. It has a broader distribution than just there, but that's where most of them came from. So I see less of those in the trade now, which I think is good because that last one, the Ornithassimus, tends to get a little bit bigger and is by far the nastiest of the 3. And Claudia, those 2 tend to be pretty mild, and you can mix with about any others. And then the Ornithassimus is just one you don't want to try to mix with others at all.
Jason Longer says, don't forget to mention Hunter's wrasse compatibility charts and information on your website. I assume that's where they can find that.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. So I have one chart on there for Silolabris, fairy wrasses. That is my best stab attempt at what you can mix amongst the fairy wrasses. You can mix a whole lot, but there's certainly a few that you would want to avoid. And again, it's guidelines, right? I mean, there are some of those guidelines you could violate. If you've got a 500-gallon tank, you're going to be able to get away with a lot more than someone with 120 gallons.
So I see a couple of questions here about the Melanoris wrasse. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yeah.
The question was, do they eat flatworms? And I see Adam from Frag Garage is saying, I've definitely seen them snack on red planaria flatties.
Yeah, they will.
Those are a good one. Those are a good wrasse to have for flatworms. I've heard that before too.
Yeah, it's a pretty common one, pretty easy to get a hold of, not too expensive. Generally pretty mild. I would say like 9 out of 10 are pretty chill, but there is that, that terrible odd chance, 10%, that they can be kind of nasty and not so friendly to others. But odds are in your favor.
This is a good question, and this is a question I had as well. Brinks 128. What wrasses can I keep with a bare bottom tank? I know folks do that.
Yeah, so there's a split there too, and it's genus dependent. So some genera do not need sand to sleep in; they just sleep in a mucus cocoon in the rocks. I don't mean to plug this by any means. I'll just clear right now. My site is my own thing.
Plug away, man. Plug away.
Yeah, to be fully transparent, wrasseguy.com. I pay $20 a year with Google to keep that running, and that's it. There's no sponsors on there or anything else. It's just my $20 to just put my stuff out there free for all, and not on Reef to Reef. There is a buy me a snail option. It's through Buy Me a Coffee on my homepage. If you want to throw me a few bucks, I'm not opposed, but I'm also not out here soliciting funds either.
Well, no, I mean it's a lot of work to put that information out there. So yeah, you should.
And so on my general guide, I break it down by genera, and I put a note in there for each one if that genus does or does not require sand. If you have a bare bottom tank and you've got if you really want to keep it leopard grass, which needs sand to sleep in, the only real way around it is you got to give them a sandbox. And by that I mean a little container. It can be Tupperware, it can be Gladware, whatever, right? It can be a ceramic dish for that matter. But a little box with just an inch or two of sand in it, and you can, if you've got the right setup in your tank, you can hide it around in the back someplace. It doesn't even need to be visible, right? It just needs to be there, and they will find it and use it. Now, of course, they're going to throw sand out over time as they use it, so you need to
need to refill the sandbox.
Yeah, you're going to be vacuuming sand off your bare bottom and putting it back in the sandbox. But if you're okay with that, that's how you can do it.
John Gordon, Hunter, if you ever want a sponsor, let me know. So there you go for the website.
All right. Thanks, John.
Do wrasses that need a sand bottom, that have a sandbox in a tank, is that stressful for them? I mean, is that an appropriate way to house a wrasse, or is that going to just kind of stress it out since it's going to be looking for sand all over the place? But I guess it's kind of hard to ask the wrasse's feelings, but
yeah, well, I've had people bring this up before, and I guess after I've snorkeled enough wild reefs, you quickly, as you go around an actual reef, you quickly have the realization of the whole reef bottom is not sand, right? There's a whole lot of rock and everything else. There's only sand in certain areas. And so with that in mind, I don't see the problem, right? Like they have to be used to finding the areas that have sand in nature. So I don't see that any different in your tank.
Now, there are some wrasses that don't need sand, right? There are certain wrasses that, right? And what would those be?
Fairies and flashers are the two best examples of ones that don't need it at all.
Interesting.
Pseudocalamus do not either, but again, don't mix them with other wrasses.
Yeah, I was thinking from my peninsula tank, but I don't know, man. I had some great luck without the. So I mentioned Euro bracing earlier in the live stream, and my rationale is that Euro bracing does help prevent some wrasses from jumping out, because you've got a little bit of a border around there, and if they're kind of surfing up the side of the tank on the glass or the acrylic or what have you, then they get to that Euro bracing and they get rejected, put back into the tank. But so I had great luck with my Euro braced tanks without screens, without having any fish jumping, including wrasses. But the last few years, not so lucky. So I assume it helps a little bit, but I guess the best way to be safe about it is to have a good, top with netting on it, right?
For sure, yeah. Euro bracing helps. It's a matter of time though before they go through the non-brace and out of the tank they go.
Right. I mean, you were saying before that you had egg crate or whatever, and they go through the egg crate. I mean, that's a pretty tiny place to go through.
Yeah, the clear 1/4 inch or even 1/8 inch netting is certainly the way to go. It works great. You can find it in a lot of places now. It used to be hard to find a decade ago, but not so much.
Here is another good question, and an appropriate question. Manny's Reef. Any wrasses that are not as jumpy as others?
No, I mean, yes, in the sense that the Halichoris and leopards, the Macropharygnon, are a little bit less likely to jump. They tend to go down as opposed to up if they get spooked. However, that's not a license to say they don't need a tank cover, because that's totally not true. That's like one of my must-have kinds of things for keeping a wrasse. Right on that list always is a completely covered tank, and I say completely and stress the completely part. I also like to say if the head fits, the fish fits. If there is a hole big enough for the head of the fish to go through, it is a matter of time before they go through it. So understand that and have your tank completely covered before you get in the wrasses. Otherwise, it will be your heartbreak later.
Yeah, Rob B's Reef. Your bracing does not help. Laugh out loud. But NSB Reef's rimless definitely doesn't work. Sean Clark. I have not had a jumper ever with your brace. So
we could get into the why do wrasses jump, but
why do they jump?
It's often they get spooked, right? It's a defense thing. I like to talk about the fact that, again, we're dealing with wild animals, and we collect them off of a wild reef, at considerable depths oftentimes, right? So if they get spooked, up can be a good way to go to escape a predator in the right situation. But they're not used to having the surface, less than 2 feet above them.
Right.
And so how do they get spooked? Well, that can be a lot of things. That can be the other fish. That can be an odd reflection. That can be you walking by the tank. That can be a bird flying by your nearby window. There's just endless amounts of things that could spook them. And I think I said it in there already, but they can spook themselves. Like you can, if you watch the tank long enough, you'll see just them spook for no apparent reason. It's just what they do.
Yeah.
They're trying not to get ate, right? They don't understand they're in a tank with nothing that's going to eat them.
Yeah, no, that all makes sense. All right, another question from the viewers. Chris Officer 3, my dream wrasse is the Red Sea 8-line flasher. I'm not even going to try to pronounce the scientific name. How do you pronounce the scientific name?
Pseudocalinus octotenia.
I would not have gotten anywhere close to that. What would you suggest for a minimum tank size for that fish?
Or I'm sorry, I said pseudocalinus. I meant to say paracalinus. Big difference. Minimum tank size. Okay, so flashers. I've kept a lot of flashers over the years. I don't really like to keep them much anymore, just because they don't live long enough. It's like a 4-year lifespan, and that's it. So,
wow.
I've bought some of the more pricey flashers before. Maybe Paracalinus bellet is a good example. Bell's flasher. Those are usually several $100, $600-700, somewhere in that range. Super pretty, but to buy them at the size that they're pretty, you're going to get a year or two, and that's about it.
Yeah, that's a bummer.
So I got tired of the price tag for that. So the only flasher I really still like to keep, and I have one in my tank now, is the 8-line flasher. A few things. They get a little bit bigger. They're kind of an oddball. They're kind of somewhere in between a flasher and a ferry in how they look and their classification. They behave more like a ferry than they do a flasher. So, anyhow, my blanket recommendation for flashers is a 3-foot long tank. And that's because it's not so much of a volume, it's just the space they need to do their thing. When they really flip on the light switch and they're, flashed out and zipping around, they really need, at least 3 feet of length to do the thing. You could keep one in a 2-foot tank, but you're not going to get the flash behavior out of them like you would in something bigger.
They're really cool fish. I had one in one of my tanks, and I didn't realize I had a flasher wrasse. I don't know what I was. I bought this wrasse. I forget the name of what it was. But then it started doing its thing in terms of like just changing colors. I was like, holy shit, man, that is like pretty bizarre behavior. And it was like really freaking cool that those fish can do that stuff. This is an interesting question. BC, any wrasses that are captive bred?
Just saw that. Yeah. So there are some. I would refer you to Biota Group .com. I think if you Google Biota, you'll find them. Everything they have is captive bred or captive raised, I guess. But no, fish wise, I think everything's captive bred these days. So there have been a few things. Cleaner wrasses have been captive bred. I'm not really a fan of them myself.
Yeah.
To keep a cleaner wrasse, you really should have a big tank with big fish, and then you can keep the cleaner wrasse fine. Anything else may not work out like you think. There have been Melanurus has been captive bred, not at commercial scale, but it has been done. And another Halichorus as well. I'm trying to think now if it was Biocelatus or Chrysis, the yellow wrasse. I can't think which it was. I think it was Biocelatus. So some Halichorus has been done. Berries and flashers have not been done at all yet. That's a bigger challenge for sure. But I'm sure there's people working on it. There certainly was some renewed interest in pushing that along with the Hawaii fishery getting closed, because they still could be collected and done. From someone could collect broodstock, still wild broodstock, and then captively breed them and have those in the trade. It could be done for the right people with the right means. So there's people working on it. I know there's things happening, but commercial scale wise is still pretty limited there.
Gotcha. Question: we've kind of talked a little bit about fairy wrasses. On your website, you say they're one of the most elegant, active, and colorful reef fish. Are there any compatibility issues with those fish? And if so, what are some of the guidelines for mixing them with other wrasses?
No, they're pretty mild and easy going for that part. There's a few species that stand out kind of as a sore thumb that can be kind of on the nasty side, but 95% of them are really easy going.
What about just in general for wrasses diet? What do you like to feed your wrasses? What's a good idea in terms of a feedings for wrasses in a reef tank?
Yeah, so it's another important thing too. It's kind of right up there with the covered tank is they need to be fed. It's kind of like keeping an anthias. Small feedings often.
Yeah.
So personally, I've been using the PE mysis pellets for a few years now. I have those on an auto feeder on the tank, so that feeds once a day, and then I'll feed frozen twice a day on top of that. Frozen wise, meaty things. I like. Mostly these days I'm using LRS and PE mysis, usually just LRS. I've used rods in the past. I'll still buy it sometimes too. I'll use Hikari mysis in a pinch. I really don't like it compared to PE, but if I have to, I have to. I buy whatever I can get locally. So if I can get LRS, I'll buy that first, and if I can, I go to other things.
Gotcha. Rob B's Reef, my wrasse is getting found on copepods, which leads into my next question, Hunter. Is it better to add a wrasse to a mature reef tank that does have like an established pod population, or can you put a wrasse into a relatively young reef tank and feed it what we're just talking about?
It depends on the genus again. So fairies and flashers, they're going to feed from the water column, and they're not really going to pick off pods on the surfaces. They might do it if they get really hungry, but if you're feeding them properly, you're never going to see them do that. So those guys could go into a relatively new tank and be fine, as long as the tank was prepared to be fed that often, right? So not cycled 2 weeks ago,
yeah.
but okay, assuming we're past that, right? Yeah, they could go in a few month old tank just fine. Some of the other guys that are more the benthic feeders, so Halichorus are pretty easy for the most part, but like your leopard wrasses and especially the tamarins, yeah, I would like to see a bit more of an established tank for them. 6 months would be good, a year would be better.
Right. Yeah. That's kind of like been my assumption with wrasses. Those are like the last kind of fish that I would add to a reef tank. I'll add hardier fish like some chromis. Whatever, the tangs and for algae control, and then sort of like in the at the back end of my fish list, the wrasses would be kind of like the last I would put into the to the tank.
Yeah, and a testament to that, on a tamarin, on an Apsis femininus, a blue striped tamarin. Everyone, oohs and ahs over that fish. So
Yeah.
I've kept a few over the years. I had one for several years in my last tank at my old house, to the point it was starting to turn male on me. And we moved across town, like 20 minutes across town kind of thing. And I set up this new peninsula tank, and I had to start over with new rock because I had a complete Postulipora takeover in the old reef tank. It was total plague. Like I'd never do it again. Pretty coral, but basically like Aptasia all over the tank, and it's got a nasty sting. Anyhow, there was no way I could salvage those rocks, so I had to completely start over with fresh rocks. Now I had cycled everything in a stock tank, for a few months ahead of time. I was, not concerned about that. But I did have the concern of, it's going to be a pretty fresh tank. Is the femininus going to be okay? And it's like, well, I don't really have any other option anyway. So do what I can. And feeding like I do, still feeding 2-3 times a day, frozen at least twice. I lost that femininus after a few months. And then I waited. I gave it a good year after that point for this tank to be, nicely established before I put one back. And I did, and I've been fine with the one I currently have for several years now.
So you mentioned something that made me think of something that happened to me. You said one of the wrasses changed sexes, and so this happened to me to one of my wrasses. I had an African leopard wrasse. I love African leopard wrasses. The females. I always have had the females. I think they're just gorgeous.
Yeah, the blue star, the
yes,
bipartitus.
Yes. Yeah, I think they're so cool.
Bipartitus is the right Latin.
And I've never had a male, but so I was, I've had this fish. I had that fish. I had the Chiodi leopard wrasse, and I had I guess it's called a black spotted leopard wrasse, which is kind of like a more common leopard wrasse. It's white with black spots. I don't know if that's the, yeah.
Yeah, Milagris is the Latin name on that one.
So I had those three, and one day I walked by the tank and I looked into the tank, and I saw this fish. I'm like, where the hell did that come from? I was like, holy crap, man! This thing, I guess it did it changed. It changed from like a female to a male.
Yeah, you had green with stripes, which was not the fish you had
I was
before.
like, what the hell? And so what causes that? I mean, that was weird to me because I don't think I had made any, changes in terms of my fish population. The wrasses were the same, but this thing just all of a sudden changed sex. I mean, are there anything that would spur that on, or is it just after time it might happen?
Well, yeah, after time it might happen. That's the real answer. The why is all social dynamics. I mean, it's all a hierarchy in the tank kind of thing. And I've made this analogy before too, but most wrasses, I mean, they all kind of have this push to become the alpha male, and then the females transition to male, and everyone's trying to kind of fill that role of king, if you will. This makes me think just real recent here. There's a video that's been circulating. I've seen it like literally a dozen times, dozen different places on Facebook in the last 2 days now. If I talk about it long enough, I'm sure someone can put the link in to the originator here from Facebook. There's a school of Paracolanus nursalum somewhere in Indonesia. And the thing that you can really dissect in the school is there are more males than you can count. Like there's just males all over this video. And if you look close, and there's some stiller moments in it where you can see some of the males courting females, but the male to female ratio here, it just looks completely skewed. It looks like there is 3 to 4 males for every single female that you can see, and I think that's kind of a good testament to what happens there. So the females, even ones that are spawning and breeding with males for a few years, most of those tend to end up transitioning to male. So it's a thing that happens in nature for sure. If it happens in your tank, it's back to those sort of social dynamics. And so if a female, feels such that it can assume a position of power, that's kind of what cues that transition to male then. So if you've got other fish in the tank that are more dominant and, I hate to say keeping it in check, right? But holding its place in that social hierarchy, that could suppress that from happening. But if it's the only leopard wrasse you have, there's probably no one that's going to stop it.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's a really cool dynamic, and I was kind of bummed out because I did like the female coloration, but I don't know. I'm finding it tough to find those fish now these days. I don't know if it's just kind of a cycle in terms of what's going on collecting those fish, but
yeah, it's probably ebb and flow. I see that from time to time where we can be inundated with some species for a long time, and then collection stops for a little bit, and a few years later it'll kick back up again.
So you briefly mentioned the Hawaiian ban earlier, and if that gets reversed, what are you looking forward to coming back into the hobby? I know the what was the it was like a mated pair of what was the wrasses coming out of Hawaii? They were bright orange.
Several flame wrasse, maybe?
Flame wrasse, yes, yeah.
Yeah, so Cerulabris Jordani, that's a good example of one of the ones that has just gone. Like, you can't buy them now because there's no collection. I should caveat that I have seen some trickle in, but it's people illegally collecting.
Oh.
That's how those are coming in, So unfortunately, that does still happen. It's handfuls, right? I mean, let's be honest about that. It's not really a problem, if you will, in terms of population numbers. And that's the whole thing in itself too. And I'm sure you've probably had someone talk about that on the show before, but one of the most well-managed fisheries in the world, all the data to show it's sustainable, right? And it didn't matter. Anyhow, so yeah, the flame wrasse would be one for sure. Potter's wrasses are endemic to there. I still have one because the one I have, I inherited from another reefer. I don't know the age of that fish now, but it's probably 6, 7, maybe 8 years. He's getting big.
They're really cool looking fish.
Yeah, I've seen that species full grown before, to where it's probably, I don't know, like in the 7-inch range, and they get kind of girthy too. They get big top to bottom.
Wow.
So I'm hoping I keep that one for several more years, but we'll see. Some of the pencil wrasses came out of there. The ornate Halichoris wrasses came primarily from there. They do come from a few other places now. One of the other big ones that's completely gone now is the red-tailed tamarin. That was endemic to Hawaii. That's completely shut out of the trade. There's a few others too, I'm sure. Trying to think of any thalassomas. A lot of the saddle wrasses, the thalassomas. Let me caveat. Thalassoma is a genus that you do not want to put in a reef tank at all. But for big swim tanks, they can be great in there. Saddles were primarily collected in Hawaii. They're found other places. Surge wrasses, same thing there. I don't know. I could think about this and go on, but there's a good probably dozen-ish species that were primarily or exclusively collected in Hawaii, just wrasse-wise.
Yep. I hear you. Well, yeah, it should be interesting to see what happens with that situation. Hopefully, it will flip around. But I guess the bummer is these days the prices of fish. And I'm not sure that's going to go down anytime soon. I don't know. I mean, I'm not an expert on that stuff, but freight costs and just collection issues and all that sort of thing. And once prices are up, it's kind of like hard to envision them going back down to where they were.
Yeah, I doubt it. If freight costs significantly came down, then maybe we'd see some cost reduction. But yeah, I don't think it'll change. Drastically.
All right, Hunter. Well, listen, man. I think we'll wrap it up. I know you need to go and get some dinner there because it's getting close to dinner time for you. But any final thoughts in terms of what we've been talking about tonight?
I don't think I've got a whole lot there. I definitely like to say, thanks for this opportunity. It's been a great hour and a half. Definitely appreciate it.
Yeah, no, listen, man, it was great to get to know you, and for the folks that are joined us sort of late, we spent a good chunk of the first half hour of the show talking about the situation at Reef to Reef. So there are 2 links in the video description. One's a petition and one's an update about the situation at Reef to Reef. So I recommend you checking those out. And you could also check out Hunter's website, the wrasseguy.com. We've been talking about it. It's got a lot of great information on there, and I will certainly be using that as a resource down the line. But thanks, Hunter, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to spend with us tonight.
Yeah, for sure. I'll also mention on my website, I've got my email address on there. It's just therasseguy@gmail.com, but there's a few links to it. If you need to email me for questions, please feel free. I know there was a lot of questions here in the chat that I'm sure we glossed right on over. So, take a look at my site first, if you would, just to see if you've got the answer there. But if you don't, feel free to reach out and email. I answer several emails a week, and I don't mind. I might take a day to get back to you at worst, but I'm generally pretty prompt.
Cool. All right. Well, listen, Hunter, thanks a lot, man, for being on the stream. I also want to thank both Bulk Reef Supply and Ecotech Marine for sponsoring the show. I also want to thank all of you folks that tuned in tonight for the comments and the questions. Really appreciate that. Also want to thank Paul, the moderator, who is also the president of the Boston Reefer Society. Please join and support your local reefing clubs. They are so important to this hobby. I also want to let you know that all episodes of Rappin With ReefBum are available as podcasts on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and Amazon. My next Rappin With ReefBum live stream will be on next Thursday, January 19th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with the guys from Polo Reef, Andrew Sandler and Rashid Story. So that should be another great show. The full upcoming schedule of guests you can find on reefbum.com under the YouTube section. So until then, be safe and be well, and we will see you next time.
Thanks. Take care.